welcome to Two Guys One Game. The Alien movies are great, well, most of them anyway. They're filled with dark spaceships, badass marines, and of course H.R. Geiger-inspired xenomorphs that are still some of the coolest looking creations ever. And of course there's been a load of video games based on the franchise, so how about I shut the hell up with this needless intro and we take a look at some games. Aliens for the Atari 2600 follows the plot of the movie very closely, and is essentially a Pac-Man clone, just like the movie. You play as Ellen Ripley as she walks around mazes that are suspiciously like the ones found in Pac-Man, collecting dots in order to get to the next level, and that sees you walking up the screen in a fashion suspiciously close to that of a certain frog. Once you get to the top, it's back to the maze levels, and then repeat ad nauseum. So yeah, it doesn't follow the plot of the film at all, but it's an Atari game. You shouldn't really expect it to. There are aliens in the mazes that each behave differently, and they'll hunt you down to stop you from collecting those dots. And really, that's all there is to the game. Yeah, so it is basically a clone of Pac-Man and Frogger, but to be fair, it's also about the same amount of fun. So if you'd like those games, then you'll probably get some enjoyment out of this. It's all about the high scores, so just keep playing until you lose all your lives, or if you're like me, just keep playing until you get bored, which is probably after about 20 minutes. Aliens for the arcade is a fun side-scrolling shooter, kinda similar to Contra, but not really. I shouldn't really need to tell you the plot, all you need to know is there are aliens that need killing. Thankfully, Ripley is very good at it, and has loads of weapons that you can use to take down the many types of xenomorph that are here to make your life miserable. There's no jump button, which at first is odd, until you realise that you don't actually need one. Instead, you have a button that makes you shoot while standing up, and one that makes you shoot while crouched. You'll switch between these two depending on what evil bastards have decided to show up. The graphics here are great, and they really look like they're something out of the Alien graphic novels. There's also plenty of Xeno blood, and although the animation is quite basic, it does all run very smoothly. The bosses in particular are huge and look cool, but yeah, it's an arcade game, so it's also pretty cheap. The bosses take way too many hits, and of course they're impossible to beat without using up a good few continues, but that's to be expected. Overall though, this is a really fun shooter that isn't too long, so it doesn't outstay its welcome. Aliens, the Theatos encounter for their Game Boy Color, is a top-down shooter that reminds me a lot of the old Alien breed games. The story is classic Alien. You play as a squad of Marines as you investigate a distress call, and yep, there's aliens. There aren't loads of missions here, but each one has a different objective. Often though, they involve rescuing survivors and getting rid of any aliens knocking about. And what surprised me the most is it's actually pretty fun to play. It's a top-down view, and you can choose from a selection of your squad, and if they die, that's it, they're dead for good. Run out of squad, and it's game over. The graphics here are decent, but there's a few issues with clipping, and it's easy to get stuck on the scenery. Thankfully though, the same rules apply for the aliens, and they often get stuck too. Unfortunately, shooting is quite awkward and can still be tricky even when they can't move. The sound and music is here, but none of it is particularly memorable. In fact, I found the music actually to be quite annoying. Hey, but maybe you'll like it. Overall, this game was a pleasant surprise. It's definitely not the best game ever, but it's fun while it lasts, and the problems it does have don't stop it from being enjoyable. Alien 3 for the Super Nintendo was definitely a bit of a surprise for me, mainly because I really enjoyed it. The game is based on the film of the same name of course, but it has very little to do with it really, seeing you blasting aliens and completing mission objectives, and that's what was really good about this game. It actually gives you proper mission objectives to complete on each level. Thankfully there's no crappy time limits, and you get a decent amount of firepower to deal with any of the aliens getting in your way. The game looks fantastic with some great backgrounds and some really good animation, and unlike a lot of games with this amount of detail, the controls still feel responsive and aren't sluggish. But of course it's not perfect. Although the controls are good, the jumping can be a bit of a pain to get used to, and there were a few times where xenomorphs would appear from off screen and I had no time to react. Also, the map that you get is pretty hard to figure out and can only be accessed through computer terminals, so if you're lost it can take a while to find where you need to go. There's loads of versions of Alien 3, but the Super Nintendo one is by far my favourite, and one that I definitely recommend. Alien Trilogy is a first-person shooter that loosely incorporates elements from all of the three movies into the stories and levels, and when I say loosely, I do mean very loosely. The quality of the alien blasting is fun, but it's also hard as balls, sometimes through design, and sometimes due to just being a bit clunky these days. The levels are classic find the key or switch to open the next door to the exit, while you're bombarded with enemies who want you dead, and they do a pretty good job of it. My main issue with the game is the level design. It gets very confusing, mainly due to everything being so dark. There were levels when I was just wandering around aimlessly for ages because I couldn't find a button on the wall that just looked like part of the scenery. You have a decent selection of weapons to use here, though ammo can be hard to come by. Your pistol does have unlimited ammo, but against most enemies it's about as useful as a feather tickler. Graphically, the game looks decent and the atmosphere is pretty much spot on. The aliens all look good here, they're pretty pixely, but it looks quite charming. This, however, is still a decent game. It is showing its age and is quite stiff, but it's worth a play. Alien Resurrection for the PS1 is a game that's sort of infamous for being ahead of its time, and that was thanks to it being one of the first console games to use the twin-stick control method that pretty much get used everywhere now. And of course it's a first-person survival shooter that loosely follows the plot of the movie. The first thing that will strike you is just how good the graphics are for the game. The areas you're in are huge and have loads of detail, and some of the lighting here is very impressive, especially as it all runs very smoothly, and the aliens and humans all look pretty good too. So I say this is a survival shooter, and that's because while you do get a fair amount of weapons, ammo is very limited and enemies are very hard to take down, especially the xenomorphs. Some of them will take a good clip from your weapon before they go down. Also, if you're caught by a bastard facehugger, it's pretty much an instant death. I'll say it once, this game is hard. You get a few objectives to complete, which is your usual turn on the power or collect a key fare, but it's all good fun and not very repetitive. It's definitely still worth playing today. It's very difficult, but check it out if you can. So there you go. 6 games based on the Alien franchise. As you all know, there's loads more out there, so I'm sure we'll do a part 2 at some point. But in the meantime, let us know what your favourite or least favourite Alien games are. Don't forget to subscribe if we upload new videos when we made them. And you can even find me on Instagram, where I've got hundreds of video game reviews. Just search The Reviews Brothers. Now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.